I'm Hubert Jordan. I was born here back in 1940. I left to go away to college in '58 and spent 3.5 years in the Navy and wound up after that in Atlanta, where I worked. I was an accountant and mostly for the state, and a old house came available here, antebellum home, and my wife and I bought it. And luckily I was able to leave the state. We have a bed and breakfast here for 20 years, and she passed away, but she had the idea for this museum. The building was built in 1859 because the original one was burned by the Yankees, and these old depots, there are about 10 of them, were built mainly to ship cotton out after the war. We had to re-roof it and do all the stuff, but we actually got federal T grants to do. Got about $100,000. We redid the original roof was on this building.
And this goes to my saying that a lot of folks here viewed the Confederacy as sort of an extension of the Revolutionary War and a demand for states' rights. Obadiah Pierce settled here in 1805, a pioneer of Jefferson County who was given a land grant after the Revolutionary War. His Pierce siblings, like John W. Pierce, died fighting for the Confederate Army and the Georgia Volunteer Infantry. Seth Pierce was also a Revolutionary War soldier from the Pierce family. And over here you've got another volunteer infantry in the Confederate Army, Obadiah Jr.
That's a picture. They had artists attached to the troops, and this was out about 1.5 miles west of here. It was Tolva's Mill Pond at the time. It's Lewis's Lake now, but they were camped there. And this supposedly is Sherman here, and this made the magazine, the big magazine, the Harper's Weekly, made that in April of the following year. This was in November. He was a ruthless but great general. Now we have Confederate generals here. And we'd have some of the Yankees too, but it's difficult to find them in Georgia. Picture of a Yankee. This is just about all the generals in the Civil War. That's Lee, of course. And those Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, and that's Stonewall Jackson too. And here they are. And here's the saddest thing here. That is a list of 101 slaves valued at $800 to $900 a piece. If you bring the $900 to date, bring it up to date, it's worth about $39,000. That ain't much for a human life, but it's the way things were back then. There were 64 in Jefferson County, this county. There were 15 in Washington County, which is where that place right there is, and a few 32 in Johnson County, which is south of us. And that's what it was. He paid taxes on $137,000, even back then.
I'm here at the Old Market Square in Louisville, Georgia, a town chartered shortly after the American Revolution in 1786, named after King Louis of France, a supporter of the Continental Army. And in 1796, it became the capital of the state of Georgia, which it would remain until 1806. And at the center of the Old Market Square was this building where slaves were sold. In recent years, some people have questioned whether or not these auctions took place, but all evidence seems to suggest that it did. This actual structure is made of the original timbers, and it seems to have stood all these years, a testament to the past history of Georgia. Now, it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1978, but during the George Floyd protests, people began pouring out all over the country, notably in the Carolinas, where Floyd's family came from, but also here, to demand that this be moved elsewhere or torn down as a symbol of oppression. Now, I feel that it's important to remember sites like this, because if you don't have them, some of the dumbest elements of society might begin to suggest that the horrible events that happened here never took place at all. I mean, after all, where's the proof? You have to be pretty dumb to fall into that line of thinking, but I've seen it happen. In fact, this was marked in 1936 by the Works Progress Administration as the only standing slave market in the state of Georgia. And it's also said that this is original timber. Most of it is. Some of it's new, some of it's added for structural support. If you look around here, you can see that these timbers are original, but the base of them is new wood to prevent it from collapsing. These two timbers here are also new, and what I am really fascinated about, if I pan around here, is all of these nails. You can only imagine what kinds of documents were pinned up here during the Civil War, the War of 1812, the Creek War, proclamations by the governor, by the sheriff, escaped slaves. And it's fascinating to think of the events that this square has seen. And you can still see a couple signs here reading peace. In August of 2020, the city council voted to remove this, but nobody really knows where they're going to move it to. And I think it's important that people remember it. So if it's just torn down and dumped somewhere, that would be a huge disservice to American history, because this is American history.